In Middle-earth, wolves were much like the ones we see in our own world today. Tolkien created Middle-earth as kind of a fantasy parallel of our own world, so these wolves weren't originally evil, just dangerous wild animals trying to survive. People feared them because of their natural instincts, they were predators, but they weren't malicious by nature. We do know that regular wolves existed as of the timeline of the Fellowship of the Ring, because right after the Fellowship climbed back down from Caradhras, there was this intense battle where Gandalf actually makes a bunch of trees burst into flames to drive away attacking wolves. Many of these wolves were killed in the ensuing battle or were ultimately chased off by the fire. However, the next morning, all the dead bodies of the dead wolves had disappeared. The only evidence left of the fight was some charred trees and the arrows of Legolas, which were scattered around, which should have been on the bodies of the dead wolves. Gandalf said something along the lines of,
"It is as I feared. These weren't ordinary wolves."
Exactly what they were remains a mystery, but it shows that in Middle-earth there were both regular wolves as well as other evil types. It is entirely possible that they were animals of the wild that were creations of Eru Ilúvatar, or more specifically through Yavanna or Orome. Wolves, like many other animals in Arda such as crows, bats and Mumakil, had nothing to do naturally with the forces of darkness, but they served in varying points throughout the ages. But they were more commonly associated with the dark powers, that is Morgoth in the First Age and then with Sauron in the Second and Third Ages. There are also statements of wolves or creatures of wolf shape that first came to Beleriand over the mountain passes or through dark forests alongside other fell creatures during Melkor's Third Age of captivity, which is not to be confused with the Third Age of the world, since after the destruction of the two lambs, Melkor was captured by Tulkas using the chains of Aule and was thus doomed to abide for 3 ages long, and this coincides with just before the year 1400 of the Years of the Trees, and so before this, these creatures of wolf shape came to Middle-earth. Now there are essentially 4 different types of wolves in Middle-earth. The normal ones would have a long snout, thick fur, 4 legs, a tail around as tall as 85 centimeters when measured in shoulder height, although this would be massive compared to a hobbit. Now these are the normal wolves. Now with that in mind, let's take a look at the different other wolves, starting with the White Wolves of Forrodwaite. In the Fellowship of the Ring, during chapter A Knife in the Dark, there was a mention of white wolves, natives of the frozen lands, the northern lands of Middle-earth. These wolves usually stayed up in the icy regions like Forrodwaite, far from places like Eriador. But in the year 2911 of the Third Age, during one of the harshest winters ever known, called the Fell Winter, things changed. The extreme cold and snow from the north reached as far south as the Shire, and with it came the White Wolves. They invaded Eriador and even roamed to the Shire. Because the Brandywine River had frozen over, the wolves were able to cross into the East Farthing area. This invasion marked the first time they were seen in Middle-earth, and also the last time. And yet, it was also the last time the famous horn call of Buckland was used, until it sounded again during the War of the Ring over a century later. So these white wolves can just be Middle-earth variants of Arctic wolves, which just shows them as animals fleeing imminent death from the harsh winter. So the next 2 types, which can be said to be evil wolves, are a bit ambiguous to say the least. These are the Wargs and the Werewolves, which up to this day remains a hot topic of debate, which you shall see in the comment section, I assure you. The reason for this is Tolkien himself. In some instances, these evil wolves were just stated as wolves, which can be understood as they are a type of wolf, although corrupted and filled with evil. In other instances, the terms are used rather interchangeably, which may point to the fact that they were just 2 names for the same thing, like human and men, or fire drakes and dragons, or cattle and cows. However, there is also the case that they may be totally different due to the types of evil spirits that dwell inside of them, and also due to their appearance or level of power. So wargs are described as an evil breed of wolves, possibly inhabited by malevolent and evil spirits. Their origins aren't clear, but it is suggested that Morgoth could have had a hand in breeding them back in the Elder Days. By the Third Age, Gandalf the Grey considered wargs to be among Sauron's servants. Wargs in Middle-earth were essentially demonic wolves, often bigger than normal ones, but not massive like horses, so probably closer in size to ponies. orcs used them as mounts, and they were called wolf riders. Though usually only smaller types of orcs, which were probably as tall as dwarves, could ride them, which gives you a sense of their size, that they may be on average around 1.2 to 1.4 meters in height. One of their most striking traits is that they have their own language, and they were feared by horses, and they were also a force multiplier. So when Saruman's eastern force attacked, which were composed of wargs, they moved with incredible speed and were a much bigger threat than his larger western force composed solely of orcs, despite being smaller in number. The wargs beyond the edge of the wild were once led by a great grey wolf chief, often allied with the orcs. His pack numbered in the hundreds, and they frequently met with the orcs of the goblin town to plan raids on the woodmen. During these attacks, wargs were held back from devouring anyone the orcs intended to capture as slaves. Later in the Third Age, the Fellowship encountered another pack of wargs in Holland, led by a wolf that Gandalf called the Hound of Sauron. This pack likely came from beyond the Misty Mountains, possibly related to the one Thorin's company faced many years before. Despite Gandalf's warning, the Hound of Sauron attacked and was killed by an arrow from Legolas. Though the pack initially fled, the other three warg leaders launched a second attack in revenge, but they were swiftly defeated. And after that, they still continued to serve Sauron till the end of the Third Age, till Sauron's demise. So the next type are werewolves. Werewolves in Middle-earth were a different breed altogether, much larger and far more powerful than regular wolves, or even wargs. There is this huge debate on what exactly they are, but one thing is clear: they weren't actually wargs. Gandalf even mentions them separately. It is said that werewolves were dreadful creatures with spirits trapped inside their bodies, though some, like Sauron, could willingly take on the form of a werewolf. They might have been the spirits of the Umayar or other spirits forced into wolf shapes through dark magic, much like the Barrow Wights or the Silent Watchers. So these weren't beings not originally wolves, but either close to or were forced to be in those shapes. And although they don't feature heavily in written records of the Second and Third Ages, Gandalf does mention that werewolves were part of Sauron's forces during the late Third Age, alongside orcs, trolls, wargs, and wraiths. They seem to have a mysterious and tangled backstory, blending necromancy and ancient evil spirits. The three notable werewolves of Middle-earth's First Age were of course firstly Draugrelin, who was the first werewolf, and he was created by Sauron by imprisoning an evil spirit in a wolf body, or a wolf form. He then became the sire of all the werewolves in Beleriand, including the massive Carcasses, and might possibly be the ancestor of all the wargs of the Third Age. Draugrelin lived in Tol Ingorhoth along with Sauron, but was eventually killed by Huan, the Hound of Valinor. He might have been one from the Grey Annals, as it is told that creatures that walked in wolf shapes entered Beleriand in the Valin year of 1330. So the next great werewolf, although there were many in Tol Ingorhoth, was of course Sauron himself, who took on the form of one. So he took on the form of a giant wolf to battle Huan, the Hound of Valinor, in hoping to fulfill the prophecy that Huan would only die to the greatest wolf ever, which is kind of narcissistic. However, Sauron failed, as the greatest wolf was actually Carcasses, bred by Morgoth from Dracluin's line. Carcasses was a massive terrifying beast, feeding on elvish and human flesh, and was said to guard the gates of Angband. After swallowing a Silmaril during a fight with Beren, the gem burned him from inside, driving him mad with pain. He then rampaged through Beleriand until he reached Doriath, where Huan and Beren and the others hunted him down. In the final battle, Carcasses broke the girdle of Melian and went inside, and he was fatally wounded by Huan, and he also fatally wounded Huan before dying of the wounds. Now, scientifically speaking, the wolf hounds of Valinor were also a subspecies of wolves, since all dogs are domesticated wolves when we take a look at it from this standpoint, from the scientific standpoint. And since they are awesome in their own right, we shall take them in as the fourth type in this video. So the races of Middle-earth had domesticated and employed dogs, with notable exception of dwarves who didn't have really good relations with animals. Hobbits had domesticated dogs, like Farmer Maggot, who owned 3 to guard his own field. The dogs which were bred for hunting were termed as wolfhounds or just hounds, and the greatest of them all was Huan, the Hound from Valinor. He was one of the hunting dogs of the Valar called Orome, the Hunter, and his ultimate destiny was to die at the hands of the greatest werewolf to ever walk Arda. So Huan was a male dog and could speak only 3 times, had unnatural strength and valor, and was around the size of a horse, which makes him bigger than any other wolf type except for the greatest of the werewolves, which might have been as big or even bigger as in the case of Carcasses. And with that, we end this video on the wolves of Middle-earth. Now lay back for a while and have a long thought about it. And if you're ready, then do check out more of our videos on our channel. We might have content you haven't thought about. Anyway, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, fam.